Good morning, Kira Whānau, Shabbat Shalom. Anyway guys, I'm actually here in Jerusalem at the moment, but I'm actually about to head over to the Palestinian area called the West Bank, which is probably one of the more well-known areas of where I'm going to. I think there's a lot of controversies, a lot of stuff in the media, and obviously there is a lot of conflict that actually happens over there. So today is a good time to learn and actually understand what's going on. So once we get there, I'll show you guys around. First stop on our tour around the West Bank is Ramallah. Ramallah is definitely a place that creates a lot of headlines and is considered one of the most volatile places on earth, due to it being in the media lots because it is quite infamous for violent protests like this one shown here. However, the Ramallah I saw on the day was just like any other city. It had a bustling town centre, and I personally couldn't picture that this place had a violent, volatile history. It was vibrant, noisy, and it had a real Lawrence of Arabia feel. I knew then I was actually in the Middle East. Next up, we visited the site where Yasser Arafat was laid to rest. A tour guide explained that due to Israel not allowing him to be properly buried in Jerusalem, that this is not his tomb until he's actually buried in Jerusalem. Personally, you need to make up your own mind about Yasser Arafat. I've always been on the impression that he was a murderous tyrant, especially towards his own people. Yet, someone else might actually have a different opinion to myself. After Ramallah, we headed into the desert. It may not look like a desert of sand, but it is still considered desert. The views are amazing, and I never expected the West Bank to be so mountainous. We then stopped at Jericho, which is said to be the oldest civilization on Earth. We were shown around the archaeological site and shown some more about the well-known finds before we were shown a video of what they believe Jericho looked like during the time of the civilization. After Jericho, we headed to Qasr El Yahud, which is the traditional site of the baptism of Jesus by John the Baptist. For me, this is where we saw the first mass crowds of Christian pilgrims, and unfortunately I wasn't able to film anything. We headed to Bethlehem for lunch, where I had the yummiest vegan meal of eggplant and Middle Eastern traditional fare of hummus, tahini and pita. After lunch, we headed to the Church of the Nativity, where it was believed Jesus was born. As mentioned at Qasr El Yahud, there was a lot of Christian pilgrims during our visit, and the church was no different. The line to get into the grotto where he was born was 4 hours long. 4 hours! So we didn't get to the grotto. Word of warning, do not go in October, it's the peak season for Christian pilgrims. We then actually explored the Armenian and Roman Catholic churches before we actually headed to Bethlehem for a sweet treat of knaffe. This wasn't vegan, but it was definitely something to try whilst in the Middle East. It was a pastry made of semolina, cheese, orange water, sugar syrup and pistachios. After afternoon tea, we headed to probably one of the most famous parts of the West Bank in the last 20 years. In prevention of ongoing terrorism in Israel, the Israelis built a wall to prevent Palestinians coming into Israel. Obviously, it causes a lot of conflict. On one side, you've got to imagine that this is something that the Israelis are doing to protect themselves, similar to how we would actually put a fence around our house to prevent intruders coming in. However, as it's been shown in history such as the Berlin Wall, previously, it's a message of oppression, domination, and where people are actually trapped in a prison-like situation. There's a lot of street art on the wall. Banksy has been to the wall to paint there, as well as most recently there has been a painting of, humorously, Donald Trump kissing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, which by the time I actually came to shoot had been painted over, which I was quite sad about, as it had some similarities to the one in Berlin with Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev and East German President Erich Honecker, which I'd actually saw a week prior. One thing I will take from my trip to the West Bank is that the opinion I had about Israel and Palestine has changed. I can't sit on a one-sided fence anymore and point the finger. Both Israel and Palestine have got their problems. There's no doubt about it. Israel is backed by the US in their fight against the Palestinians, but one thing that the media doesn't actually publish is that Palestine is actually backed by a global aid movement to fund terrorist groups like Hamas. The more we learnt about this situation, the more we can actually be part of the change to make steps forward for peacekeeping or unification. Thank you to Abraham Tours for providing this tour. I recommend this to anyone, and I have left a link below in the description box on how to actually join this tour. It is an all-day tour and definitely well worth the money. You honestly will learn a lot about the situation.